Hello, welcome. This is the EU Bubble Insider, a podcast about the EU bubble industry. This podcast is part of a bi-weekly newsletter bringing you the most up-to-date insights, case studies, but also information about upcoming events, who and what to follow to stay on top of things, if you want to be on top of things in the EU bubble industry. And for this first episode, I couldn't have dreamed of a better guest than Roland Freudenstein, Vice President and Head of Brussels office at Globsec, former long-term Policy Director at Martens Centre. Welcome, Roland, to the show.
Hi, Krzysztof. Great to be with you.
Roland, the pleasure is all mine. And, I double-checked before this interview how long you have been in Brussels. You've been living and working in the EU bubble for almost 20 years, if I got it right. Is that correct?
18, but it's not my first time in Brussels. There were times before. And I spent also part of my military service in Belgium. So it's my third tour in Belgium and by far the longest.
You're currently the Vice President of Globsec. Before that, you were, since 2008, the Policy Director at Martens Centre. But you've been also in the public service. You also worked in Warsaw, my hometown, and that's where we actually met many years ago. You were the head of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation office in Warsaw. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to start this conversation with a question. What were the turning points in your career, in your life, that influenced your career path and led you to this role in Brussels?
I would say 2 points. One is political. That was the big event for my entire generation, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And then there was a private component, which was the creation of a family, founding a family in the late 1990s. And those were the two factors that, in hindsight, really influenced my career path and my choice of jobs and choice of places where I work.
So, to someone who's actually not an insider, this podcast is called the EU Bubble Insider, but I hope that we will also get listeners who are not insiders of the Brussels bubble. How would you explain? Maybe sometimes you have to explain your job to family members who are not from this industry. How would you explain what it is you actually do as a head of a think tank?
Depending on how informal the conversation is, sometimes in a slightly exaggerated amount of modesty, I say we produce a lot of hot air in this think tank that I work in. But of course, if people seriously want to know and seriously don't know what think tanks are all about, I say more something like, we write studies, we look at political problems, we analyze them, we propose solutions for political decision makers. And of course, we organize conferences and meetings and ways for people to exchange ideas, hopefully different opinions and different ideas. And that's more or less what a think tank does. And that's what I've certainly been doing for most of my life.
And your typical day in this work looks like what? You come to your office, you sit at your desk and you think. Or what do you do? What does your typical day look like? You write maybe all day?
Yeah. Well, maybe let's start with this, that I think about politics much of the time, right? Not at night, but politics is like my second being, I would say. In the sense that I've always been interested in this and I think about it all the time. But in a more structured manner, I do arrive at the office, let's say at 9 or a couple of minutes later by bike. I always bike to work. If you do a job that involves a lot of sitting or standing, sometimes, you appreciate some movement in fresh air. So that's a very important part of
And
my
traffic jams in
daily
Brussels are
routine.
not so
And
nice as well.
absolutely not. However, I must say, having a bike, you still have relatively good chances in bypassing them, and bike lanes have gotten more numerous. I remember how hard it was to bike here 20 years ago, and how easy, relatively speaking, it has become. But okay, so I arrive at the office. I start immediately looking through my emails, and there are like per day on average of between 50 and 100 emails that come in. I don't have to personally answer all of them, but I certainly have to do something with them. Either alert a colleague, or answer them myself, of course. Um, and then I start making calls, having meetings with people, very often attending events of other think tanks in Brussels, because I mean there's a whole bunch of them in this town, obviously. I increasingly in the last years, I've done online activities. So whatever I do in person, sometimes I do it now online. Like most people, I'm not totally keen on that, but it's become an indispensable way of communicating quickly, and over great distances. I think this will continue to be the motivation, by the way, for online work, is just overcoming a geographical distance. Besides that, I mean, then there are lunches, there are dinners, there are after work beers. So, these are informal ways of doing the same thing that I can do with a suit and a tie and around a conference table. But sometimes it's much more practical and more fruitful, quite literally, over something to eat and drink.
So it's not a 9 to 5 job.
No way. If I went by 9 to 5, I could not be doing my job. And frankly speaking, also to my great chagrin and that of my family, sometimes weekends are also involved in my job. I also couldn't do it if I strictly went by the rule that I spend all weekends at home. That would not work. So sometimes I'm at conferences, I'm away, and sometimes I have to sacrifice part of my Sunday to write. Because the point is that at certain times during the year, especially in spring and in autumn, my job gets so busy and the timing gets so dense that weekends are the only time when I have really the opportunity to sit down and think and write something longer and more structured.
You mentioned the pandemic and how it changed the working online, how it moved a lot of work to online. Would you say it made your work in any means more efficient because you could do things without having to travel, or you could meet people without having to travel?
Yeah.
What's your perspective on this?
I mean, I think that's €1,000,000 question. The initial answer is yes and no, but I think the jury is still out. I think history will be the judge. We will see in 5 or 10 years how this stronger and stronger component of online work has affected us. My preliminary answer is this: overcoming geographical distances, fantastic. It's not possible without online work. The richness of human exchange, part of it gets lost online, obviously. I observed something strange in my previous job at the beginning of the pandemic. Every human organization has teams, has groups, has pillars of the organization. Now, the complete or almost complete lack of in-person contact almost inevitably led to a strengthening of the pillars in our organization, and the teams started working less among each other. which is in the long run a very unhealthy thing. And I could see the effects on the organization. Things sometimes took a lot longer to prepare, from a conference to a research paper to brainstorming. It just took longer. And a certain lack of communication between teams always creates friction. So it even led to interhuman friction, interpersonal friction in some cases, just because we didn't see each other every day, or not even every week. So, thank God this is over. And I think we're not quickly going back there, unless, God forbid, some kind of new variant emerges. But that was a very difficult time especially for larger organizations and teams of people that are dependent on regular and intense communication of groups of people. So that's my personal observation. That was a very unfortunate effect, and I can say with some certainty that this is largely gone, because in my outfit here, Globsec Brussels, we come to the office every day. There is teleworking in exceptional cases. When people ask me, can I telework this Friday and Monday? Then I say yes, usually, but it's by far not the norm. And the norm is that we go to work 5 days a week.
And then a big part of the work that almost every organization does in Brussels is connected to networking, connected to debates, conferences. And I wanted actually to ask you if you have, like, from your perspective, because I see a lot companies, a lot organization start going back to organizing live events. The European Parliament is again a living place, not an empty building. Events are being held, debates are being held. From all those tools, let's say, because events, debates, papers, position papers, multimedia publications, these are tools in advocacy work. Which of those is your favorite in terms of maybe efficiency, or maybe the one you feel most comfortable with using?
Well, I must say that's maybe because I'm part of the senior generation here, but I still prefer purely in-person events as opposed to hybrid or purely online. Purely online can serve to connect people that are far away from each other. Hybrid events can do the same and yet give you some of the intimacy of and the density of communication between the people who are in the room. But there is a total difference between those who are visible on a screen, maybe 5,000 kilometers away, and those who are in the room. And, the people that are on the screen will never be able to communicate as intensely as the people who are present in person. So my favorite kind of event is still the in-person conference or the in-person meeting. Also because of, people's concentration in any online communication wears off much faster than the way people are still able to focus in an in-person meeting. And if they all put away their great mobile communication devices, that's even better. But I think we have to live with the fact that a sizable part of any audience, even in an in-person event, are still glued to their devices. At least from time to time. Sometimes I have to hold my hand physically tight to my body. Otherwise I'm tempted to grab the mobile phone, and then sure enough, I will not be able to fully concentrate on what the speaker is saying at this moment. That's a habit one should actively try to work against. So, to cut a long story short, I'm totally in favor of the good old-fashioned in-person meeting.
And, from my perspective as an event organizer for companies, for organizations, what I learned, you can say it's obvious, but the scale of it was a surprise for me, because when the pandemic started, I would say most of our clients have put their event budgets on hold. And, in some discussions about maybe moving the event online, because we can still address the same topic, we can have the same speakers in an online event. A lot of them said, well, yes, but we can't do the networking after the event. You can't do the networking on Zoom or any other tool there is. And I think this is also one of the most important advantages of in-person events, that you get to actually meet people and do the quite important talk in the advocacy work, which is the work at the work at the coffee table, the small talk.
Absolutely correct. The coffee break, the even before the small talk and the handshake, before that, but also the sometimes much more substantial talk in continuation of the official part after the event is closed. I mean, all these are invaluable parts of official interaction, and they, you cannot reproduce these in online conferences. However, I mean, for example, I've also now been working with clients, been fundraising with corporate donors and partners in my new job at Globsec. So I can say that some corporate partners, for example, not only have no problem, but actively encourage online events, simply because I think their aspiration is to reach a larger audience quantitatively, very simply. And that is possible with online meetings. You will always get more people to attend an online meeting than an in-person meeting, where people have to move physically, have to go to a different place. But then the disadvantage is that the listening and participating experience is much less intense in online meetings, of course.
So then maybe the golden solution is a hybrid event where you can both have people on site. You can also invite speakers who are important but wouldn't otherwise attend. Let's say someone from the commission working from Luxembourg. They wouldn't want to come to your event in person, but they can appear on the screen.
Absolutely.
So maybe, but it's also not, I would say, always the right solution. It very much depends on the goals.
Yeah, it creates a tilted playing field between the people in the room who can communicate much more richly and intensely, and the people on screen whose communication is clearly hampered and curtailed, I would say.
That's true. And Roland, I would say you participated or moderated hundreds of events, or is that an underestimation? Should I say thousands?
Probably 1,000, not thousands, but around 1,000. Yeah.
So you're perfectly entitled to set the principles for a well-organized debate, political advocacy debate. What would you say are the things that every good debate should be built on?
Okay, 3 things. First of all, a good moderator brings out the best in all the people in the room. I mean, that includes the speakers, but that also includes the audience, right? Or maybe another part, the online participants, if there are any. So to bring out the best in everybody, so that everybody feels afterwards they have not only learned something, but also given something, right? For example, that means that you can't have just a debate among the panelists without sufficient time for Q&A from the audience. And sufficient time is not 5 minutes at the end of a 90-minute event, right? That is half or 40% of that time. So second point, I mean, it depends on the kind of event, but many organizers have a certain expectation. They want to bring a certain message across, so to deliver a message. For me, it's very, very, very often the purpose of holding the event at all So that's my second task or mission as a moderator. And the third element, really importantly, and there are not many moderators who manage this, is to strike the right balance between being a lively moderator, but also, taking a step back and let the others shine when they can and when the opportunity is there. And to strike this balance is extremely difficult. I mean, there are moderators who are like a gray mouse, and they never say, they say speaker A, speaker B, speaker C, a question, thank you very much. And there are moderators who are wannabe speakers, right? Who actually probably resent the fact that they're only moderating, but they love to hear themselves talk, and they make you feel it. And that's the other extreme. So, to go right in the middle here and strike a healthy balance between the two extremes is a major feat that moderators have to learn.
I'm sure you had debates about one thing I want to ask as a follow-up to this first principle about letting everyone do their best and shine, as you said. I'm sure you had debates where you faced participants who agreed on most of the things. I've seen debates like this from the point of an audience, and my experience is that it's a quite hard thing for a moderator to keep such a debate engaging and interesting. Have you ever had a situation like this? And if yes, what do you do to actually make people who agree on something debate?
Well, okay, 3 points. First, you don't want to let it get to a situation where everyone agrees by selecting the participants in such a way that they most likely politely disagree with each other. I mean, that, by the way, that succeeds very rarely, but also because people don't even try. They don't even try to invite speakers with different opinions, right? So they should try more. Second, if the debate gets boring because everybody agrees, it's up to the moderator to create some creative friction, right? Then the moderator must ask a question from a viewpoint which may not be the moderator's own, but still is critical of the speakers. The moderator should challenge the speakers. It doesn't mean that he holds another speech or makes statements all the time. But you can very well formulate a question that critically examines what a speaker has been saying and even implicitly presents another point of view, right? And third, sometimes the charm of a debate might not be the difference of opinions, but an exchange among the speakers, right? Exchange of experiences, of arguments. If my mission in an event is to improve the general knowledge of arguments in support of global democracy, for example, the speakers may come from different countries, from different political tendencies, and they may exchange experiences like best practice in how to convincingly argue the point, so that the takeaway at the end is not, I've heard so many different opinions, but the takeaway is I have learned some new arguments for something that I believed in already, but I didn't quite know how to put it in all the different contexts that I can imagine. And now I'm a bit smarter. Next time I have to argue my cause, I will know a couple of arguments more. So that can also be the purpose of an event. But generally, I would tend to emphasize through both the selection of speakers, but also the moderation, I would tend to emphasize differences of opinion so that the listener can make a choice in the end and, maybe even change their perspective.
So what seems to me a good conclusion from what you said is also that the moderator should always know what to expect from the speakers in the debate. So do some research about who it will be and what kind of appearance to expect from those people. Roland, I wanted also to discuss one of your past projects, which is not a debate. I was actually expecting that you will say this was your favorite tool. And here is a small disclaimer. This is a project we did together from, if I remember right, 2010 to 2015 to 2020. It was your own YouTube show, the full name was the European Political Week in 60 Seconds. It aired each Friday. I recently counted that the show had over 200 episodes and got over 10 million views over those 5 years. And obviously, for the small industry that the EU bubble is, it's quite an impressive achievement to get such a reach on a format that discusses internal politics of Europe. And I wanted to ask you what do you think was the driver of a success of the 60 Seconds? Was it because this was the only satirical show in the bubble, or what are your thoughts about it?
Well, first of all, let me revel in the success a little bit and share with you the two reactions that really made my day, week, month, whatever, in reaction to the Week in 60 Seconds. One was from a visitor to the Martens Centre from Moldova, who came up to me. She was at the time a member of the Moldovan Parliament. She came up to me and said, "I watch your show regularly. I love it. And I know you. You're Roland Freudenstein, right?" She's now the president of Moldova. It's Maya Sandu.
Wow.
So that happened to me during the first 3 or 4 years of the Week in 60 Seconds, and the other experience was in a Kiev hipster cafe. A guy came up to me that I'd never seen before, and he had never seen me in person, but he came up to me and said, "I know you. You're the guy from the Week in 60 Seconds." So fantastic reactions, fantastic feedback. Now, what was the secret of success? Well, the idea itself, I mean, as you already hinted, to do a political comedy show for Brussels is not the norm. It's far from that. In Anglo-Saxon places like the United States or Britain, you have much more of a tradition of comedy in general, but also political comedy for that reason. So for an Anglo-Saxon background, it would not be so unusual. Brussels functions along very different principles when it comes to human communication. And
have you been getting any negative reactions over those years?
Oh yeah. There was hate mail. Because we, as you very well remember, we used to combine humor with political messages, right?
Yeah.
We usually spoofed the political enemies or antagonists of the European People's Party. And these were right-wing extremists, but also leftists, or nationalists of all sorts. And from these people, sometimes we got very, very strong reactions. Sometimes claiming that the Week in 60 Seconds is not funny, which was of course ridiculous, but most of the time just basically abuse and personal insults and so on. But I mean, this comes in our age of social media. This comes with public exposure. and I've discovered in recent years on Twitter, when I became much more active in the last 3 years on Twitter than before. And I've realized that the more successful a tweet is of myself, the more the likelihood is that I get hate, really hate of a very, very primitive and very, very unjustifiably personal nature. That's almost automatic. Now, what was another element of the success, besides the fact that we combine politics and humor in a place where this is not regularly done? I think the mixture of spontaneity and thorough preparation of the individual clips, right? So usually the week would start with brainstorming on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday was used for actually writing the script, and it was usually one other person who wrote the script and then me looking over it, and then sometimes input from third and fourth persons. But the script was usually finished by Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday the thing was, it was recorded on Wednesday or Thursday after the script was finished immediately. And then on Friday it was produced. And that was your job, Krzysztof, masterfully. The production of the clips with special effects, visual, acoustic, all kinds of innovative use of graphic tools and instruments. So excellent. And I think it's a combination of all these factors. You know, it's like a very creative approach to political humor. A lot of improvisation. Of course, a sound analysis of the field to start with. Looking at social media, looking what young people are interested in, because I mean, this was directed to younger people, I must say. The generation between like late teens and let's say 30 or so. That was the main clientele here. A mixture of all this and then a very smart use of state-of-the-art tools in producing this kind of show. So all of this together contributed to its success.
And what would you say were because nowadays, and I think this for some people listening, this might be a very interesting and valuable takeaway, because more and more, when we started the 60 seconds, the Martens Centre was an absolute innovator in terms of doing regular video format content for social media. Now we have podcasts. A lot of organizations do different types of multimedia productions on a regular basis. What's the added value of it other than reach? Because I understand reaching the younger audience, maybe making some people uncomfortable or angry with with the right satire.
Dating Angela Merkel on Tinder was one of my.
That was one of the top viewed and shared episodes actually.
But then ending up with Vladimir Putin, and we would not produce that clip today just simply because Putin has broken all these records in cruelty and criminal energy, so that you wouldn't want to make jokes about this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. But
anyway,
so what would you say is other than everyone else is doing that, so we also have to? What is the added value of doing multimedia content for social media and doing it as a regular format, regular show? What was the added value for what did the Martens Centre get out of it?
I think a lot of people became aware of the Martens Centre that way. We looked at our website, started maybe participating in conferences or reading our stuff. I think it also created memes that were then used by other people about politics in making a political argument or cracking a political joke about some opponent. People used material that they got in the week in 60 seconds. And I think, I mean, just generally the mixture of entertainment and politics was a very important thing. I mean, we also modernized the face of at least the Martens Centre, if not to a certain small extent the EPP, the European uh, People's Party itself, to which the Martens Centre is affiliated. So I think it had a modernizing effect on the larger political entity that we were connected to.
Roland, we mentioned earlier that there's so much going on in Brussels, around Brussels, in the in the capitals of each European country. Obviously, in your job, you have to stay on top of things. You have to, you come across different people when you network. You have to know what's going on, from my perspective, I also work with people in the bubble, with clients. I also try to stay on top of things by reading the news. But to be honest, I'm not feeling very successful in that, because there's just too much. And I wanted to ask you, from your many years perspective, how do you filter out what's important? What's the healthy approach to following topics, to following developments? Because there are so many in the bubble.
Yeah. Let me start with a confession. I also feel I read too little, or I know too little. I mean, as you said, there's so much going on that it's impossible for one person to even faintly equally be on top of events in all the relevant fields. So one has to be selective. A second point, I mean, there are some media are better than others, okay, in following up. And I mean, I may shamelessly here advocate the Brussels playbook of Politico, which really every morning by 7:15 gives you an overview of what is important to know for that day. And it's sometimes not accurate, and sometimes they peddle rumors. But by and large, it is by far the best value for time spent. And by the way, it's for free. Okay.
So at least you'll know what to discuss during the coffee break.
You know what? It's my absolute recommendation for my colleagues in Bratislava. I say, if you want to know what's driving not only Brussels as a place but also the European Union as a whole, you read every morning the Brussels playbook, and you by and large know what's going on. Now, besides that, of course, there are classical news. I watch BBC, sometimes German television news. I've stopped reading papers in the classical sense. I look at their websites, yes, but I don't read papers anymore. And then, of course, there are social media, and I'm really depressed by what's going on in and around Twitter at the moment, because I had just, for my generation, I had very intensely gotten acquainted with Twitter and was just beginning to regularly use it. And now Elon Musk, I mean, I don't think I have to say anymore. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know anyone who can tell me credibly that there is an alternative that delivers the same intensity of sometimes rumors, sometimes fake news, but sometimes also very valuable information. So I would say, the Brussels playbook particularly, but then generally, media and news in the classical format, but also social media are very important in exchanging ideas and learning new facts.
And do you listen to any podcasts as well? Do you follow podcasts, or you don't have time for that?
Not regularly, I would say. No.
Because I have a couple of podcasts myself that I like to listen, but I find it very hard to follow them on a regular basis, because interesting, good podcasts are long pieces of content, and that requires a serious time commitment.
See, this is the point. I've never understood why a couple of years ago people said, or some people said, that podcasts are going to replace all classical media, simply because the intake of information in a podcast is completely sequential, right? Uh, Whereas if you look at a page on screen, I mean, you see many things at the same time. You see, you know, the website of a normal daily newspaper or weekly newspaper in Europe. You see several topics on the same screen, and you can quickly zoom in on this or that. You know, a podcast, you really to know everything that is being said, you have to listen to it from A to Z. And some podcasts take half an hour and so on, and some people don't have half an hour in one piece, right? So I've never understood the craze about podcasts, I must say, but maybe that's personal.
Well, we are recording a podcast, so just for the record, I believe that what we are doing is not something that will go out of date. I think the conversation with you will be as relevant as it is today in a year from now, or even 2 years from now. And I think this is the better side of podcasts. I like podcasts that are sharing some valuable information, interviews with people that you can go back to, that you can listen when you have the time, and that are not so real time relevant, like news or something that is just about only relevant this week, and then it's not worth listening to.
Sure.
But talking about multimedia and digital skills, are you recruiting anyone right now for the Globsec office?
No. I would say, I mean, we're working with 2 people full time and a bunch of trainees. And let's put it this way: if I tap into some major corporate funding in the next year or so, then we can start thinking about enlarging the office. Well, that's Globsec Brussels. Now, as far as Bratislava is concerned, there are always jobs. There are always jobs on the line. I mean, up for grabs in that sense. So one just has to look at the website of Globsec. And
I'm asking because I wanted to hear what kind of skills you are looking for when you recruit people. What do people working for you have to know or have to get the job?
Depends on what kind of job we're talking about, but I would say generally, managing considerable workloads, intercultural communication, high flexibility as to working hours. I mean, like, work hard, party hard, but in general, also a creative personalities. So these are more or less the main qualities that we're looking for. And of course, knowledge of politics in most of our functions. Not all, some are more technical or more organizational, but generally we do require some knowledge of European politics.
Yeah, the knowledge, the basics are important, but as you said, I think the ability, especially nowadays, where everything moves so fast and the rules change very often, and often tasks are last minute, unfortunately. Then the ability to think out of the box is one of the most crucial skills. Not only in the Brussels bubble. Roland, right. we're I mean, everything you said, I think is very valuable for both people who are working in the bubble and those who are thinking maybe about starting a career. But to make this, with the last question, I wanted to make this podcast a bit more time relevant to the end of 2020. We are recording this in November 2020. So if you could, as the last question, tell me what will be, because we are almost in 2023, everyone is now thinking about strategies, about what to focus on next year. So could you share what the Brussels Globsec team will be focusing on? What you think or what you expect will be on agenda next year? What topics you expect to drive discussions in the bubble?
Well, as Mark Twain is supposed to have said, predictions are very difficult, especially when they concern the future. But I think we can absolutely, certainly predict that Ukraine and its fight for existence and freedom against the Russian invasion is going to drive the day in much of 2023 and maybe even beyond. So that's a given, I would say. I also think that Russia itself may actually be in the focus even more strongly. And we do work with democratic Russians. So my prediction is that during 2023, something might happen in Moscow that requires our very close attention, and to have some experts on hand that can explain things to people and can write analyses and so on is very important. I think transatlantic relations will remain as relevant as they have been, especially since the beginning of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. There's a renaissance there of NATO and of transatlantic relations. So this will not go away. Besides that, I think China, less as a rising power and a little bit more maybe as a rising threat to freedom and democracy across the world, is going to be a major point of attention. It has been increasing in significance all since about the year 2000, and I think this will not stop. But it might turn a bit more negatively than it has 20 years ago. So I think this is, and then the climate debate and the question of our digital future will continue to be relevant. And I bet you one thing: there will be an event or a development that I haven't named in this little series here, which might become at least as important as the first points I mentioned. But we don't know what it's going to be, the Black Horse event, as it's called. So I'm quite sure that we will we will continue to be surprised, as we have been in the past, for example, by the pandemic. Hopefully it might be a positive surprise in 2023.
I was hoping you will not mention the word pandemic, but at least you didn't mention it as a prediction. So let's.
No, look. Yeah, maybe. I think we've all learned something about ourselves and about staying healthy and so on during the pandemic. How about regime change in Moscow to something better than Putin? I wouldn't exclude it.
That would be for sure be great, not only for Ukraine, Europe, but also for Russia, I guess.
Yep.
Roland, thank you so much for all the wise words, or all the knowledge, all the insider know-how that you shared today. To everyone who listened, thank you for your time. Please make sure to follow us, to follow the Molecule Group, and to subscribe to our newsletter, where we will share more insights, updates on upcoming events, and also more episodes of the podcasts in the future. Roland, thank you very much again, and everyone have a nice day, afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye, Krzysztof. See you soon.